I'll call the meeting to order at 6:03. First, we have our minute taker here, we have our timekeeper. So first we have public comment, if anyone would like to make a public comment. Okay, so we'll move down then to first action item, which to approve the agenda. Please get a motion. Dr. Melissa first, second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, who say aye? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions. We'll move down then to the consent agenda. And please get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Justin first. Second. Kathy second. Any discussion?
Just my usual question, which is the resignation, what position is that person making?
There's the intervention.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll move down then to the executive limitations and monitoring. First is an action item to approve monitoring report for policy 2.3 financial conditions and activities. May I please get a motion?
So
Mike first.
Second.
Melissa second. Discussion, please.
I don't think, just trying to follow the math tabs, so. Sorry, number 5, make unbudgeted single purchase or commitment greater than 15,000. So Patrick, on one of the things you mentioned, that audit, and I didn't get to Floyd fast enough because I couldn't find a copy of the audit, but will the auditors look at every transaction over 15,000 and compare it to the budget to make sure it like out of, or maybe it's the Floyd question, would you use that as evidence? I just wanted to better understand that.
yeah, Floyd can speak to it. I don't think they look at every transaction.
A sampling, probably.
Right, more of a sampling, but Floyd.
I missed the beginning because I was just sending you the link to the board, to the audit, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, so, in the, evidence that Patrick used for this monitoring report with regards to, making purchases over 15,000 that are outside of budget. He noted that in the audit, did not indicate that the superintendent made any unbudgeted single purchase greater than 15,000, and I was curious what procedures the auditors do to validate that.
So it's just a straight sampling and our compliance. Right.
And so then they compare it to the budget to make sure it's not outside of what was budgeted.
Well, it's a single item, and what would be the single item that's budgeted for that purchase would be major purchases, I would think. No, we wouldn't have, hiring an employee would certainly be a budget item outside of that amount, but more focused on, if we had budgeted to purchase, a truck for $14,000 and we spent $15,000, would that be outside of that scope? Per that interpretation?
This is an interesting one. I think
Yeah.
whether this is a finance and facilities conversation and or a policy and governance conversation, I think. Unpacking this one a little bit is worthwhile. I think that used to relate to, in some ways bid threshold, because bid threshold just a couple of years ago was 15,000, now it's 40. And the definition of unbudgeted single purchase is another interesting one to discuss. Like what does that mean? What doesn't it mean? This says the ebbs and flows of a $35 million budget happens. 15,000 isn't very big number, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it could be something that starts in finance and facilities in terms of what sort of information you'd be looking for from that lens, and that may then. Maybe that committee can inform policy and governance in terms of recommended language that they can work through their process to bring to the board for action.
Yeah.
Might be something to consider in terms of next steps.
Yeah, well, just thinking, because we do get the financial updates and all the pay orders, so we're able to see as a board and finance and facilities what purchases are being made of that. I just wasn't sure how the audit played in, and then also the treasurer. Like, I don't know if the treasurer was
Right.
comparing any of that to Like, oh, this was a $25,000 purchase, single purchase on a table, I don't know.
Right.
Did you actually budget for that, or was that outside?
Yeah.
And then if it was outside, then what, I guess, so it feels like a little bit policy governance and finance facility.
And what's interesting is, you know, if we think about that example of furniture, right? So when we're budgeting, we're not budgeting item by item.
Right, you're doing a project.
It's here's $40,000 in the furniture budget.
Mhm.
And so if we make a $20,000 purchase. Within that 40,000, is that an unbudgeted purchase? Probably not. Yeah, and then there's the inter-fund shifting piece, like, so when we have some unspent funds that we might shift to something else where there's a need that we would spend, like. And then what relation to the overall bottom line budget are we really talking about too? So this is all the kind of conversation that I think would be really good to have. Finance and facilities, and then shifting the policy and governance.
Yeah, well, and I thought you explained the shifting, and that makes complete sense to me,
Right.
like the shifting and. You had to spend a grant, had all the funds in, yeah, like the timing and all that was another one.
Right.
Yeah.
But even that, like, does that meet the definition of unfunded or unbudgeted? It's
Right.
funded, but is it unbudgeted? Right.
Yeah,
It's interesting, we recently bought a paint striker for athletic fields.
Mhm.
You program it in and it just hit a button, it goes, runs out of paint, sends you a text, says, come fill me back up. And never takes a break or goes on vacation. And we were struggling to get everything done we needed to get done. This took less than, I think Devin was an hour and 40 minutes to do a soccer field. It typically took staff 6 hours to do. Right? That would have been an unbudgeted item at $17,000, but certainly far cheaper than hiring somebody else.
right, they had an arm on it, yeah.
And where do you, what's the box we should put that in from a board oversight standpoint, certainly. From a governance standpoint. That's Patrick's call on a lot of that type of items.
Well, I think it's important to oversight in some ways, right, to help make sure that. Not buying like slot machines or something that you shouldn't be buying.
Right.
But at the same time, that can create a really big bottleneck, right? Like you had to come and get that approved by finance facilities, the board, I don't know, right? Then all of a sudden you're a month out before you can buy that, and now the season's over and. Just also,
Yeah,
really thinking about that as well.
I'll definitely have that too on the agenda when we come back from break.
Right.
Some elements to talk about, so yeah, exactly.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Based upon the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? Yes or no?
yes, yes.
Does the data demonstrate accomplishment of this interpretation? Yes or no?
Yes.
We move down then to, oh yeah. Yes, thank you. All those in favor of approving monitoring report 2.3, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll move down then to the financial report.
I have a question, I sent a question in finance for the meeting, so I don't know if I had a chance to ask it, but I was curious, like, given the surplus that we had this year. Have you ever, you all, like, when you know you're gonna have a decent surplus or any surplus really, and it's getting towards the end of the year, kind of say, okay. We're looking at 100,000, like, do we say, let's take 20 of that, reach out to our. Or around and say. We've got a pot of money, because, you know, coming up here, we've got a budget, are there any needs? You know, like, there are field trip you wanna go on, but we can't, because right now we can't afford busing and we can't fundraise enough, or. Are you in dire need of this supply or something, right? And then the teachers or the admins can put in, like, hey, I could really use $500 to do this, and then you all can say, okay. Here's all the ones we approved that fit into the 20, I don't know, just like curiosity question on how that's handled, if at all.
Not so much down to like the field trip level that you're talking about,
Mhm.
but, there are needs that pop up at the end of the year and maybe outside of what had been budgeted for it, so this connects to that earlier conversation, and if we know there's gonna be a fund balance at the end. There are things that we may be able to approve that we otherwise might not have been able to approve without that, so that's one way that that plays in. What we have historically been doing is, as we approach the end of the year and we understand what we might have for a fund balance, we start thinking about our sort of laundry list of facilities projects. Knowing that the best use of one-time funds is for one-time projects. And facilities tend to always fit that one-time expense line, so we tend to look for that.
The science labs would be a good
Right.
example.
And what, a strategy that we recently discovered that seems like a really prudent strategy is. We can create a fund for a project that we know we need to do, and rather than try to rush and get it done, like we find out in April that we're gonna have money. The idea, the likelihood of getting something designed, a contractor lined up and be able to pull the project off before the end of June is often almost impossible. But we can create a fund where we can place fund balance money into, knowing that that's a project that we can do at some point. So we basically create the seed money for that project. And then we can time that project where we get a better cost for the project. It can be less disruptive to the flow of the academic year. So that's a strategy that, again, is new to us that we're gonna lean into. We're working on some details around that we'll be sharing out with the board. In terms of what we're looking at doing that, and then wanting to make sure that we also leave a fund balance for the board to act on as well. In particular, as we're approaching challenging financial times. Knowing there's risk in using one-time funds without a plan to address why we need those one-time funds. But to have that ability to sort of buy time to take action to address the root cause. Is still something that's really valuable, so that's where we're at right now as we're approaching the year end is. How to strike that balance.
I'll add to it, to your question about, we anticipate having excess funds this year and then moving that downstream. We tend to go the other way, where we'll let the principals know they're managing their building, and they can probably best vet. What might be a program or expenditure inside their building that's not budgeted, that they can then come to Patrick or myself or Katrina. And say, hey, we've got this opportunity, we're shy $612, can you shift funds around? And it allows us to, rather than say, here's some money, go figure out how to spend it, which is always a scary position for me to put out there. To turn it the other way and let the principals drive it in their building for opportunities that fit the model that they're trying to build and use that to support projects that bring them where they go, and then let us backfill the money.
The PA system here at Mount Ava is another good example of that. You know, that wasn't something that we had anticipated last year in doing this year. But the problem persisted, and all of our efforts to try and fix it were not. And we kind of got to the point where, all right, it seems like the only fix really is to replace the system. And so having a fund balance has positioned us to be able to do that and take care of that. Time sensitive and safety measure.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question was, and this was from actually last year, like I remember hearing out in the community that there was a classroom that couldn't do the end of the year Rambridge trek, right? A lot of the elementary schools that do that because they didn't have money for transportation, because they had already done another. And the kids were really bummed, like there was a couple of students who were mentioning they were bummed they didn't get to do that. Like, one of the things, you know, because they look forward to it. And so
Sure.
my thought was, and I have no idea how much it costs to bus the kids, but if it's $300 to bus them down to Granbury, that feels like a good thing to do, to let them celebrate that, and $300 is not gonna make or break our fund balance, we haven't made that dollar amount up, of course.
Sure.
But so that's where my question came from, is like that, I'm not saying the PA system or the, all the facilities parts that we're doing doesn't have direct student impact, it absolutely does, the science rooms, we talked about that in our finance facility. But small little dollar amounts like that can also go a long way on having student impacts, and so that's kind of where my mind went when I was, you know, we have a decent sized fund balance this year. I was just curious, how do we think about strategically And maybe it's, the conversation with the principals, and then they need to make sure they're really disseminating the message to their teams at their respective schools. That if you have somebody speak up, I can't guarantee it's gonna get approved, but let's at least ask the question. So that we can have that direct positive impact on our students.
Yeah, I would say, how should I phrase this? It is not uncommon to get a request from a principal for something that they don't have money for.
Okay, I mean, that's good, I'm glad to hear that.
And they say, is there any way we can find some money to do this thing?
Yeah.
Now, that field trip example would flow through the building principal, right? So a fashion teacher would say, boy, we'd really like to go on this trip. We don't have the money for it. Is there any way you can figure something out? If they can't figure it out within their own budget, they would probably talk to me or talk to Boyd or talk to Katrina and say, hey, is there any money you have that we can do?
Mhm.
And then we would be looking at what we might have for a fund balance and we could try to support something. Yeah,
Okay,
so
I'm glad. to hear
that one didn't go through that process, I think,
Mhm.
but there is an avenue for that kind of thing.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
can also imagine the complexities of being reactive in that example versus proactive. So I like the idea
Right.
of, as it gets closer to spring or March or whatever, looking at our fund balance and thinking about ways in which we can encourage our principals to make proactive requests versus a one-off coming and asking for $300, right? Because now we've granted that just because they thought to ask, but others didn't think to ask necessarily. So I like the idea of thinking about ways in which we can be a little more systematized versus just responding to a request.
Anything else for the financial report? Let's move down then to the superintendent's report. Comments or questions for that? Okay. Okay. Move down then to the board management and governance section. So first is an action item to approve monitoring report, policy 4.7 governance investment. And please get a motion. So Melissa first, Matthew second, discussion please. Any comments? No comments? Yes, ma'am.
I just say, I think it's kind of a tough nut to crack, the onboarding new school board members. Everybody absorbs some new information and new policies and procedures in different ways. So I'm not sure that, for example, making DSBA sessions mandatory makes a whole lot of sense. But having said that, I think, having having a wide range of resources available to new members is a good idea. But recognizing the fact that the best training is time on the job. Frankly. So that's my own comment. I have no criticism of the report, but I just think that we struggle every year with coming up with training ideas that everybody is kind of interested in.
Yeah, and I'll add to that since this is my report. Those bullets were from last year's report and the year before's report. No, it's an area where we could, I don't know if we need to kind of zhuzh things up or if we just need to kind of revisit how we're doing it, or maybe there's some changes that I should make to it that reflects, that better reflects what the onboarding looks like. It's been a while since we. So I'm hoping to, if there's some editing that should happen.
The only, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so as a new board member. And I found the materials that were circulated to be very helpful. The suggestion, hey, read the policies, that's a good thing. I thought it was very helpful. There were a few items that just time commitments, it's probably a little lift, I think there was a meeting on a Sunday or something.
Yeah.
Hey, wasn't gonna go there. It was just a bit of a list. But overall, I thought it was very helpful in terms of sort of keying me into the things that I should probably get up to date on and read reasonably. So I thought that was appreciated. But there were some things I just didn't do, right?
No, I don't believe it.
And I think that's the hard part too, right? It's a time commitment, so you hand all the materials, we offer Patrick, myself and Floyd. 12 board members for whatever meetings are necessary, so, yeah, I don't know how better to improve. Onboarding, in the past 2 years, there's been extremely high turnover, I mean, we're a really green board.
And a lot going
And a
on.
lot going on,
Yeah.
the training has sort of been.
Here's the fire.
Yeah.
Good luck.
And then the VSBA stuff, I think we get a little messy only because we're policy and governance, right? And so the VSBA has some good stuff like how to be a board member and that kind of thing, but we also. Policy and governance isn't intuitive, right? It takes a little bit of practice to be a policy and governance board. And so wrapping your mind around both those really big things is hard and you learn as you go. But I'm totally open to suggestions about how to make that better or what feels better for people or just want to keep it on the way we are and what people can do. They can do.
One of the things we talked about for a couple of years is doing the very last bill would be suggested compliance improvements. A yearly refresher training session on policy monitoring and how to produce and maintain a good report. And I don't think we've done that yet. It'd be great to carve out some time. I don't know if we've got the agenda for the retreat already. I know I didn't certainly appreciate all the workshopping that was that.
We did that manual too. Together that report, manual.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's what.
That was-
That
Yeah,
was good.
yeah, that was huge, so. Step in the right direction for sure.
Now, when we're about maybe creating a page in there about writing monitoring reports, so it's just like. Step 1, general overview, and then step 2 is get a buddy for your first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And every subsequent.
Yeah. There are resources available through VSBA that we could participate in. They're often like group rate type things. So we want to really think about what do we want to commit to before probably investing, but where my mind is going is that we're getting it's the Brown Dog Consulting, the policy governance modules. We did them years ago as a board, which probably 3 of you that might remember doing those years ago. But that's a pretty good overview of policy governance. It speaks about monitoring reports a bit, but a lot more broad stroke of policy governance as well. And kind of a self-paced thing you can do on your own. That maybe worth considering. But it is heavy lift, there's a lot. It's hours, for sure.
Based upon the information provided, does the board find that the board's interpretation is reasonable? Yes or no?
Yes.
Does the data demonstrate accomplishment of this interpretation? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
For what it is. All those in favor of approving monitoring report 4.7, please say aye.
Right.
Any opposed? On the list is an action item to approve monitoring report policy 4.8 ownership from bitch. Please get a motion.
So moved.
Right first,
Second.
I was the second discussion.
I'm wondering whether the, we haven't had an ownership linkage program, it's like OLP. As long as, as far back as I can remember. And I wondered whether, given the, mandate and charge of the community outreach committee, that perhaps, what the OLP might do ought to be part of the charge of the community engagement committee. And just do away with having some new plan. It just seems like an extra task that we kind of already do. But, and I think we do increasingly better. So, I mean, I might go and say that we'll just, get rid of the OLP.
Get rid of the ownership linkage, so get
Well,
rid of.
the requirement that we have a 3-year running OLP, but instead replace it, maybe beef up the charge of the community engagement.
That would be a wonderful way to get it compliant.
Get rid of that.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
Kristen did a lot of work with it on, our group worked on our charge. And it's challenging to create a 3-year community engagement
Yeah.
plan.
I'm sure.
Is what Laura said. Cause you don't know.
No, I'm not saying we have to have a 3-year charge for the community engagement
Right.
committee. I'm saying get rid of the 3-year.
Plan, and then just replace it with something else thoughtful, which is what we're doing with our charge.
Right.
Yeah.
So was the intent of the plan originally? Did that happen when there was the unification of all schools? Was that what fostered this? Or what was the original intent for this policy, I guess?
And actually, the ownership linkage plan is relatively new. It's the last couple of years, maybe, right?
I wrote it 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
For-
Sorry, Aaron.
It's not- I'm used to it. No, so the first time I ever did a monitoring report, it was this one.
Yep.
And we didn't have an ownership linkage plan, to Brad's point, so I wrote one as a draft, and since that time, things have been busy. And the draft hasn't really gone anywhere, so I spoke to Meredith when she was writing this. Because I think, I'm not against the idea of getting rid of it, but I also sort of like the idea of like, this is our sort of globally what our plan is. And that the CEC and to some extent the policy and governance team would work together to make sure that happens, right? So I suggested that we maybe do a joint CEC and policy and governance committee meeting to sort of flesh this out, go over it and see what we need and what maybe what we don't. And then come back to you all with a recommendation, because it might not all be needed, but some of it might be, right, to fill in the gaps of what CEC cannot do or something to that effect. Or if this is board and not CEC, right? And there's a delegation, a separation there, so. That, did you put it in a bullet as a recommendation? So hopefully that will, assuming that we'll do that work.
Yeah, that seemed like a good suggestion. That's on the end.
Any other thoughts? All those in favor of approving monitoring report 4.8 for ownership linkage, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, shoot. It didn't go through.
There won't be, there's 100 names.
I had like 4 hours of good sleep, so. Okay. Let me back up a little. Based upon the information provided, does the board find that the board's interpretation is reasonable, yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Does the data demonstrate accomplishment of this interpretation, yes or no?
Yeah.
How does everyone, all those in favor of approving 4.8, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you, sorry. Okay. Next is an action item to approve for warning policies B7, C11, C4, and F1. If I could please get action. Or motion. So moved, Kathy first, second, it's a second, any discussion?
I was looking at those and it struck me how many were state mandated
Yeah.
policies. This is kind of a bone to pick with me, frankly. You know, I mean, I don't have any problem with it. I know every year now that I'm over in the legislature, I see it every year. You know, there are additional, they have this miscellaneous education, but yeah, I think there's about 10 or 12. You know, specific things, you know, you need to do this, you need to do that. And a lot of them, I thought were terrific, but you wonder. That you wonder how much time is taken. For things that, you know, maybe we'd be doing anyway. It's, that's just fine.
That topic,
That's my rant for today.
well, that topic comes up a lot in a lot of meetings with superintendents and the SBA, just how many things are mandated that you have to do and then financially cover those things. With little to no reprieve if you don't do it, right? So that conversation comes up quite a bit about how we do that and why. Yeah,
And I'm trying to think, so this is the end of my 9th year as superintendent, and I bet that 10 to 12 is a pretty decent average.
Yeah.
So if you think about 90, perhaps conservatively, pieces of legislation written specific to education that requires somebody to do something. That adds up to people and the cost associated with that, and that has to be borne by each central office. And that's part of why the conversation about consolidation and fewer central offices, like that doesn't have to be replicated so many times over if we had bigger districts. But so long as we have these smaller districts, each of them has these responsibilities, and so the overhead cost grows that way, so it's real.
So I watched the BSBA, they ran over all the new legislation. I didn't quite understand, so I was thinking of it because of the work, right, the extra work and the making it happen. I understood that the cell phone, like bell cell phone restriction
Yeah.
was passed,
Yes,
but there still needs to be a model policy written. Because it feels like whenever that is gonna happen, whatever that policy is, so it's not enacted this fall, because that will need, I feel like that's gonna be a big responsibility for everyone who works in school, frankly, to monitor as that is learned. That big policy, right, like that's gonna be like, you know, help, like lots of family conversations, it's gonna be a very demanding mandate, and again, not that it's negative, but.
you know, you can be appreciative of the concept. But maybe not the details that they're saying, okay, do this, do that, whatever. I don't even point it, that is something I think personally is a positive, but you hope maybe that they'll do something when they do their policy, that they give some attitude to the board to make it fit, you know, your community.
That may be a rare one where ultimately it saves time. You know, if we're not chasing down 8 HHB investigations at any given point because of few kids on social media doing things like,
That's true.
but instead we're doing some policy things and implementing, like. I haven't met a principal yet who's not pretty okay with that piece of legislation.
Like a lot, something coming to school, and it's so hard for me to imagine how you. Get a cell phone from a student.
There absolutely is a
And
management
it's
component to that.
unwilling to necessarily.
Or their parent who insists that they have it.
Yes, like I feel like there's gonna be some tension. It's.
And inevitably a cost to set us up in whatever way we can to collect them safely, and because then we don't want to be responsible if they get lost because we've collected them, and so
But
all those things, but in the end, I think it's going to be a very good thing.
Great.
So much so that we're gonna start next year, even though the policy doesn't require us into the following year.
Let's do it. Thank you.
any discussion about
I
the
think
meat of the policy.
there's on B7, I don't know if that was like a model policy, or if that was something we derived. Ourselves or generating ourselves, but it read a little strange to me in that. Maybe I just missed it, but it didn't really ever seem to kind of define what the policy was. Right, so it starts with a procedure subject. And even the word, use of the word procedure there is a little bit strange to me that we start that in a policy. That might be semantics that might actually matter, given the distinction that we're drawing between overall policies and procedures that Patrick sets up. But then it just jumps into details without actually specifying what the policy is prohibiting. And even the idea of entitling it tobacco prohibition feels a little strange. I did about 30 seconds of Googling, so I could be totally wrong, but there's a fair amount about vaping, which might not actually have any tobacco in it, but it has nicotine in it. So I'm not really sure. It feels like we're setting ourselves up for a really vague policy here. And I don't know if that sets us in a tough. I don't know if that puts Patrick in a tough place in terms of coming up with a procedure to enforce this policy. When I don't know if it really is specifying, like, what at its core are we prohibiting? Right,
Looks like this one isn't actually the updated one, because I just
Yeah.
looked up the VSBA one, I don't think the rate link is.
oh, cool, because that would make a lot of sense also.
Yeah. So, the actual one does have a statement of the policy, what it is, has definitions of what school grounds is, what public school sponsored, like. Goes into a lot of detail, so I'm not sure,
I don't know what happened there, so we approved the posting of that one.
we can,
I don't know, we approved this one last July. So
I was gonna say, I wonder if that's
it was up to
current one.
one.
I wonder if that's the current one.
That'd be current.
Yeah.
Let me check.
Yeah,
If not, then we'll change that, so we can maybe table that one.
that makes sense. Sorry to be a pain, but
No, that's
That's a
good.
good catch.
just not so sure what it was exactly doing. And to be super clear on the record, like I've not posted this policy. Yeah, it's like fine policy to have, and just say what it's gonna do.
The actual policy.
Not really. You know, cigarette when I visit campus.
That's not the correct policy either.
It was tobacco stocks, if you were to take.
Yeah, there's other policies that are violating income.
The one that was approved for 2018.
And then the
That's
next
nothing is in
spreadsheet.
agreement right now,
Yeah.
okay. Well, we will figure that out, Mike, thank you.
Okay, so
Yeah, that is, I think that is our current procedure.
that's our current procedure, which would make sense what it says, procedure,
Right.
okay,
But it's not the policy.
but it's on the same. Okay, sorry. Did I make that motion originally, or did someone else already?
No, we can't do.
Kathy,
Um,
we wanna just amend that to not include that, is that the easiest way to do
to
this?
table that section.
To table. Yeah. And then you seconded that?
Is it just tabling that policy with the others?
Yeah, you said.
Yeah.
So it works for me.
Just double check.
Okay,
Does that work for you, is it, or would you prefer voting it out and then making a motion? Cleaner for the notes?
It is cleaner.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
we'll just vote it down, I'm just double checking all the links before I,
I had a question on F1.
okay.
We're looking at the types of expenses that are covered in signing some pay orders recently. We covered an overnight at the hotel because of bad weather. We covered extra luggage. And I just thought those were expenses that the district shouldn't have to cover, but at some point, what is our policy? It just says total expenses that are covered such as airfare, car rental, lodging, meals, tolls, parking and mileage. I don't think that that's quite clear enough. And that there are spending limits. Well, what are the spending? Is it the same for everybody?
well, this is, I think it's directing Patrick to develop those procedures. Right,
This is administrative responsibility.
exactly,
So-
right, so like, we're saying that there needs to be procedures in place. But we're not necessarily specifying what those procedures are in this document.
We also have collective bargaining agreement.
And negotiated.
Okay, so when I'm looking at pay orders, I'm signing off on things, I have no idea. That it's okay for somebody to rack up these charges while they file it. So how do
We should have
how do we
access to a
clear,
procedure. that-
is there a procedure?
Or maybe straight from the negotiated agreement.
Well, this is where it gets complicated when you have policy, procedure and negotiated language that all have to be in sync. And if they say something different, pick which one I'm in violation of. Yes. Yeah. And I also think too, you know, as we're considering what level of detail and then what that detail should say. You know, it's, these are typically things that we want our folks going to. And we certainly want to try to minimize the out-of-pocket expense for them to go these things, to these things that we're asking them to go to and get additional training and things like that. So, yeah, where to draw that line can get complicated sometimes, and there seems often extenuating circumstances that somebody will raise and we take into consideration, and it's a reasonable level of time, and that's sort of what is at play here, unless there's something very specific that's referenced in any policy, procedure, or negotiated agreement. But that's just sort of high level how it sort of materializes. That might lead to you seeing something in a pay order without any context.
Without it, and that happens frequently. There's no background documentation for what are the parameters that I'm signing.
Right.
And it just seems to me that, you know, any reasonable citizen will look at that and say. No, I mean, you as a professional bear some of the responsibility for expenditures on the trip. Pure and simple. Everybody else does outside of public schools, so I think that we really need to look at that, and where do we include that?
I'll just speak up that I found in my profession that this seems pretty standard.
So we could look at that and in PNG and just go over that procedure. Okay, so we wanna vote down this action item and then we can create a new one. So all those in favor of accepting for posting B7, C11, C4, and F1, say aye. All those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, the motion doesn't pass. Someone like to make a new motion?
Should I make the motion to accept C11, it's B7 that we wanted to.
Right.
Yeah, but I make the motion we approve. The warning policies, C11, C4, and after.
You first. Second. Melissa second. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving for warning policies C11, C4, and F1, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. For the next action item for post sabbatical leave, I did not get to that, so if someone could go to table that till we meet again, that would be wonderful.
The table.
Thank you, Irv.
Second.
Thank you, Daphne. All those in favor of tabling that action item, you say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
He did some work on sabbatical leave. Didn't we earlier this year, we talked about the letters that we wanted to see.
Yeah, and then at the last meeting, we had more thoughts about how to, some language changes and things like that, so I just didn't get to it before this meeting. Okay, the next is a discussion item to sign up for board monitoring reports. I just updated the link, so if you had tried to open it earlier and couldn't, just retry.
The link brought me to like, it looked like nobody had signed up, and I was like, I swear, I know.
I'm new here.
So, no, there's plenty of people signed up, it's just not at the link you gave us. So like 9/16 governing style, September 11/11, monitoring superintendent performance and school board chairs role are the only three that still need people to sign up for. I went to the top of the agenda, and clicked that board monitoring report link, and that brought me up. Cause I was very much like, I cannot do the phone, and so I like.
I would do the
right
wrong
in.
one though.
So if you open the link at the top, okay, so there's three in that.
I did February.
Yeah, I did one.
So we have Liz, Justin, Barb, Irv, Melissa, Kristen, Brad, Kylie, Meredith. What are we missing?
Me,
I'm
I'll,
I'm good.
And Sarah.
Uh-huh.
so which one do you get?
I was trying to do.
Sarah will get whatever one you want.
The 9/16 would be much better for me, though. It's,
I'm to the superintendent's monitoring, did anybody sign up for that yet? I did it last year, so.
That's a good catch, Melissa.
Okay, so Kathy,
I
I'll.
already signed up. You put that in.
Yeah. Mike,
One of
you're,
those, thanks.
yep, and then Sarah will do 4.4.
Swish, done.
Nice, that's.
Next is a discussion about H 454.
Wow,
So,
right in.
I don't know if you wanna start that conversation, we'll see what
I would
happens
start
from
that
there.
conversation.
I don't know.
Go.
It happened, it passed. Not without lots of conversation and, I guess more so in the Senate than the House necessarily. Passed and is effectively, it's all contingent on the redistricting task force and not just that task force, but then, the legislature acting on the recommendations that come from that task force and actually creating the new districts. Effectively, if the new districts are not created, then everything else in this doesn't go away probably, but at least gets pushed back to some later date. So the task force is made up of combination of legislators and former school board members, superintendents, and school business managers. There are 6 legislators and 5 of folks that represent those groups that I just mentioned. So the tilt is toward more legislative than sort of the practical, sort of on the job experience, I guess, if you will. Which is a little concerning, like that makes it feel more political than necessarily what is best designed for delivery of education. But both are important aspects for sure, and ultimately it will be the legislature that acts on the legislation to create it, so I get why, and it's still concerning. There's a recommended minimum to the extent possible of 4,000 students, up to 8,000 students. How I interpret that to the extent possible is the recognition that in the Northeast Kingdom, to create a district that has 4,000 students in it would have to cover such a geographic area that you're talking about multiple counties. And that may not be practical, so that may be a region where something less than 4,000 might surface. Get into Chittenden County. 5, 6, 7, 8,000 students maybe where you tend to see more of that, higher level, full net, more consolidated geographic area. So that I think is one of the more significant components of the bill. And then, of course, the foundation formula that would be implemented, assuming we get those districts in place. And as we've been talking all along, that foundation formula, which has a base amount of 15,033. Will effectively mean less funds coming to Addison County than Addison County currently has coming in. Because we spend above that, which makes sense if you think about a leveling of the playing field, which is sort of the design of the foundation formula. The districts that spend more are going to be asked to spend less. We fall into that bucket. And the districts that have historically spent less are going to be spending more. And there are districts that fall into that. And tax rates presumably sort of follow those adjustments. So presumably spending less in Addison County may have, a positive impact on what we've seen historically for tax rates. And vice versa, in districts that are going to be spending more, they're probably going to see a tax rate increase. So plenty for everybody to love and hate, which maybe is the side of the perfect bill. Class size is also something that's written into the bill. There's no class size for kindergarten. A minimum average class size of 10 for 1st grade, 12 for 2nd through 5th grade, 15 for 6th through 8th, and 18 for 9 through 12. We've been tending to class size over the years already, so we're pretty well positioned to fit pretty comfortably within that, I think. It may create some hiccups here and there that we have to work through, but I think we've been paying enough attention to that is something that we're prepared to continue to do. And effectively, it all starts in fiscal year 29. So we have fiscal years 26, 27, and 28 that are, I will say, status quo, even though they're probably far from status quo, because there's plenty of other heavy lifting for us to do. But in terms of this legislation, we won't really feel the effect of it for 26, 27, and 28. 29 is when it would start, assuming, again, all these contingencies are met. There of course will be activity before then, like so FY 29, so that's July 1st of 2028 is when these new districts would officially take over. Operation of schools within their new boundaries. So there's obviously some work to do leading up to that, including. Even when you think about just Act 46, like we need to transfer property, we need to take care of. Debts and liabilities, we need to take care of collective bargaining agreements. There's a formidable amount of work just in creating the new business entity and transferring everything from current business entities to the new. Entity. And that will take a lot of legal consults, contract legal, we have real estate legal. There are many aspects of legal opinions and actions that are gonna need to happen, quitclaim deeds and et cetera, et cetera. Part of the bill writes into it the expectations that the AOE sort of bolster their ability to support communities in engaging in this work. There's $2 million allocated for sort of bolstering the AOE to take on quite a lot of actually added responsibility. Not just in the ways that I just described, but statewide calendar, they'll be involved in helping to draft statewide graduation requirements.
But not a statewide teacher contract.
But not a statewide teacher contract.
So, Patrick did a great job explaining 150 pages of legislation. There's a lot going on there. I've been looking around for some sort of neutral, nonpartisan kind of description of the bill. Haven't found it yet, but usually some of the nonpartisan folks over the legislative staff offices put that together. They're probably still sleeping or something, they look real busy.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they'll produce that. When I find that, I'll try to circulate it to people so you have, it'll probably be a little lengthy, but you'll have it and it's a kind of research document. The one thing I think Patrick mentioned that I think was key. I think it was the first thing mentioned was that the first step out of the box here is that they created, call it a task force, and they changed it to a committee. So a group is gonna draw maps. They're gonna draw maps to fit our district into a bigger district and some others. And there's two ways you can approach that. You can say, let them do what they're gonna do. We're okay with that. What you're probably gonna get is a lot of the flavor of intent and policy in the bill. We sort of, we talked a lot about scale, bigger is better kind of thing. And there's some value in that, but there, things like community connections and some of the values that we have here and that we've committed to over the years in articles. Before the school is closed. Those might be really important for us. So the way I look at it is you can either take a passive approach and just let this group do their work. And then the legislature, of course, has to confirm, we want those values. Or we can try to influence a little bit, in terms of what are our values? How would we like to see those reflected in a new map? And it's not just the maps, you see, it's the whole, how are the schools gonna be operated and administered? There's a lot of stuff going on when it's not just, drawing lines in the map kind of thing. So I will, the Starks for a corner here. That's gonna talk to you a little bit about this issue. And I know that we were looking forward to this conversation. Because we would like to put to the board the notion that, we should be a little proactive on this and figure out, what we want to do. So that when this task force, I'll call it task force, their meeting has their first meeting is by August 1st, so it's not happening pretty quickly. And that we try to shape something. And I'm not suggesting we can do that tonight. You know, I think though that I think something should happen for that August date. I know we've typically, not met in July. But I'm worried that if we wait till, our retreat, we wait till the fall, we might get a little behind the curve. A lot of times, I've seen a lot of these, how commissions and stuff work. A lot of times, I mean, they always come in with some goals in mind, but a lot of times they kind of appreciate someone saying, hey, here we are. And we want, for example, an Addison County type of solution. They can be very receptive to that. It takes them off the hook a little bit. So that's what I would want to have a discussion about. Whether we want to be, get ahead of the curve. Whether we want to have that kind of, robust kind of discussion before that task force meets. Then I reflect on Starksville trial here.
You really did. I mean, I think a couple of things that just add to that. I mean, if we do engage in something that's more proactive as opposed to reactive, we wouldn't be the only people doing that. Because statewide, other districts, other supervisory unions are putting their heads together and they are making recommendations. Again, I'm not sure who they make the recommendations to at this point, but they're passing motions, passing resolutions on forming solutions to their particular needs as a way of informing, if nobody else, this task force that is about to embark on something just about a month away. The other thing I would add is that yesterday, the VSBA held a remote meeting, which all three of us participated in. And as you all know, VSBA initially supported 454, but ultimately, they do not support it. And they also are encouraging supervisory unions and districts to step up and make themselves heard now. Before August 1st, and not only to influence what this task force might do, but also to help them as the VSBA, as they are formulating their response to 454 over the next couple of months. So I think that I would like to see us be proactive. I think three of us have talked about this quite extensively. I think there are a couple of things that are very problematic about 454. Number one, I mean, there are a number of new people on the board, but back in 2023, this board made a promise to the constituent towns that we would not close an elementary school without a town vote. It doesn't mean we won't close an elementary school, but it would have to be accompanied by a town vote. The way 454 is written, that could all go away. Do we want that? How does that affect our relationship with our stakeholders and our taxpayers and our community? I think that could be somewhat deleterious. The other aspect is just the governance that is being proposed by 454. Most, I would think, and others have raised this point in various venues, but I would think that many taxpayers and people who live in the four towns really don't understand that with the foundation formula, their ability to draft budgets is taken away. We've lost our control over our budgets. And further from a governance standpoint, if we were say to merge as districts within Addison County, say Lincoln, MAUSD, Virgins, and Millbury, say, all of a sudden we would have one district with one overarching board And I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, we have a hard enough time dealing with nuances of our, of developing our budget and the needs of our students. How does some big board all of a sudden decide how kids at, Moncton Community School need, need to be programmed? I don't know, I just don't know how that would work.
And there are alternatives, right? So. A lot of folks are gonna be wanting to see a single district, say in Addison County, and, God bless us, if that's, the way we wanna go, that's it. But there are, who worry, that individual communities are gonna get swallowed up in that kind of thing. I keep thinking of the town of Oxford. I don't know if anyone heard that, what happened there. They were Roxbury,
Oh, right.
and then they were included in a district with Montpelier. After, Act 46. But they're small little towns, and Montpelier is huge, but relative to Roxbury, it was kind of all bigger. So when push came to shove one year, they just hated they closed the school. And whether that was a good idea or not, I think it's decided upon. If you're just a small cog in the big wheel, you can figure out some ways to deal with that, so you maintain the community connections. But you gotta be intentional about that, to make sure that that's gonna happen. Anyway. We've been talking a lot.
I guess I have some clarifying thoughts, because at first it sort of sounded like. And I was just hearing that you were sort of making a suggestion that we as a board be proactive in terms of working within the context of the new legislation. Right, seeking out a sense of possible plans, possible redistricts that might be beneficial, and then being able to provide that feedback to this new task force committee. But then a lot of the sort of latter discussion seemed to be focused on potentially working as a board to seek change to the legislation that's already passed.
No,
Because it sounded like a lot of these concerns would only be rectified by a change to the newly passed legislation, right? So I don't know how we can make an argument about, concern about a small town being subsumed by a larger district, like if the law is that there has to be larger districts. I'm not sure what the proactive thing that you're looking for us to do is. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what the suggestion is.
I can make it up for a little clarity. So the law requires this task force committee group that Herb was talking about to bring forward 3 options. At least one of those options has to be a supervisory union, which would be a collection of districts. Theoretically, all 3 could be, or 2 could be a consolidated district as we are. So it's sort of the difference between MAUSD as we stand now versus ANESU before MAUSD. So both options are on the table. So a supervisory union that is Addison County, for example, that is made up of the current districts is an option you could advocate for that would be consistent with the law.
And around the state, it's really interesting following this study. There are a lot of hybrid situations too, where you have towns that are organized and maybe the high schools are a supervisory district, but they got a supervisory union umbrella, because that works for them, and so there are possibilities within the scope of the law. And I think frankly, the other thing, I didn't mean that we would be sort of saying you should do this, you should do that kind of thing. But within the charge of this commission, I think they're gonna be receptive to, how do we want this to look? Not just the lines on the map. How do we want this to be structured? And they, not proposing legislation, but yeah, this is how we would like to see it. Can you help us get there?
That's helpful context to know how there might be options within the context of this law that could, and again, I'm not necessarily opposed to broader discussion about, things that we feel will be really impacting this district. But I just wanted to kind of know the scope of what we might be able to do.
And I should also just clarify, I was articulating that that's feasible within the construct of the law, that you're not going outside of the law. I was in no way suggesting that, thinking SU is the way to go. Yes, this would be clear on that.
Good point that you make, Brad, about budgeting. I mean, I've only been on the board for like 3 years now, but I see less and less control now. So as far as losing control, we lost control a long time ago because we don't come at budget making anymore, saying what's best for a district. We come at it going, what can we afford here and how much is the state gonna do for us? And that's not a good position to be in. So I don't think we're giving up anything we already lost.
You also have to sort of put yourself in a foundation formula environment around budgeting and control, or that'll be substantially different than what we've experienced. Yeah.
But because you get a base amount for fuel.
State's just gonna say, this is what you get, do with it as you.
The shift in focus, I think, will be around budgeting time will be interesting. So you have your amount. And then the question is, how are you gonna allocate that? Right? And that'll be the focus. You got a fixed amount, but, finance committee isn't gonna go away. Because they're still gonna have a lot of work to do about that. And I'll say that the modeling and stuff, but later, but as we contemplate, different possibilities. Right now, we're in a bit of pickle in terms of FY 27, right? 28 doesn't look too good. And then when 29 comes with foundation formula, they have us reducing our budget by another 8%. I don't know we're gonna do that. And so, that would be one of the reasons why I would think it'd be a good idea to try to, number one, explore what we want to do. But then number two, sort of model some of these things to see if they can save this money now in the future.
I think it's probably good timing, like before, when we were thinking about how do we get options for financial planning. We were just sort of doing it in the dark, right, without this bill in place, but now that we have it, I wonder about. We've sort of got this immediate problem of what does next year look like, and what does the year after that look like, but then we've got this longer term problem of. What does it all look like? And I know the other board chairs have all been really interested in sort of working together to say like, how is this impacting your district and what might we do together to have a voice about that? And so if this board had any consensus about things they were interested in talking about or options they're interested in looking at, that might be a route to have sort of a Addison County voice to bring, which might carry a little more weight in terms of turning the boat up higher. But I mean, there are so many ways it could look, so many things that could happen. It's hard to know which way is best.
But, Mike, just to address your one point about whether it's inside the law or outside the law, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, for the legislature ultimately has to approve what happens.
Correct.
Ultimately, so if I think we should not necessarily be timid about what we do. Because even, it depends on the receptivity of the first task force. They might not be receptive at all. So when we do just say, okay, no, because ultimately the legislature would have to, pass on what task force recommends. And if we've created certain, I don't know, political, it's not really political, but then an alternative for consideration that might have some influence in monthly.
And I think, frankly, if we could reach an Harrison County consensus, it's gonna be easy. I understand, but just envision that, that's pretty powerful.
I fully agree with that.
Barb?
You're muted.
She's working on it.
Oh,
Okay.
boy, then, I can relate.
Okay, sorry about that. I think I understood. It's coming in really wonky here, the reception that I have, so I hope I'm not being redundant. But I think someone asked, is what are some of our concerns? And I think, it would be important to make sure, one of my, I think our concerns might be, how would the voice that we have for our students and supporting our students be heard in such large districts? And, how do we maintain what we have with a limited foundation formula? I guess for me is, I want to advocate for our students, and the culture of education that we have in our community. So I'm just gonna put it out there, and maybe we can work to make sure that those issues get brought to the committees that are working.
No, I think Barbara, I think we've done really good work, in that regard, the whole portrait of the learner thing, very powerful. And I suspect we don't want to lose that, and not that other districts aren't doing their own kind of exercise like that too. But yeah, it's important to maintain that sort of stuff.
So, thanks, yeah.
I don't know if there's any sort of. I don't know if there's a consensus to come up to about. Do we want to do more looking, not just for next year, in terms of what our financial plan is, but what it looks like, sort of another forecast in a way. This would be like looping in other places, though this wouldn't just be MAUSD, right? This would be a big. We're all thinking.
Yeah, and we've had these discussions, we had at the last financial committee, and then we had an exchange, Patrick and Mike. And I totally understand Patrick saying, geez, it's a question of whether we try to do some financial modeling just within the district, or we think about stuff outside. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Patrick was a little reluctant to do that sort of stuff without some confirmation from the board that was proper line of inquiry. I think it is, because it's not a completely structured, but you might be able to pick out some pieces. I reread the letters and report the other night, and there's some pieces in there that I think might be promising. It also might sort of be able to build, it'd be an avenue to build relationships with some of the other districts, just by talking about that sort of stuff. I mean, not trying to jump ahead to the item later on in the agenda, but I would I think if Patrick's gonna do something and Florida's gonna do something like that, I think they're looking for some confirmation from the board that that's appropriate.
And probably even more so. Like, in order for us to do any modeling outside of MAUSD, there needs to be a sort of a willingness on the part of whomever we're partnering with to engage in that as well. So it's gonna be work on their part to collect information and then bring it all together and model that out. So I think it's first a board, this board or another board has to say, we think this is valuable. And then engage with the other boards to see who else thinks this is valuable, and everybody who thinks it's valuable. Now we're on the same page, and now we all have our marching orders, and we can work together to do the modeling that we're talking about. So even if this board says, yes, Patrick, we think you should go ahead, like. We need something more than that to really move this forward.
Well, Erin's meeting next week with the other boards.
Yeah, I just wrote down a note to do that invitation to other boards to see if there's an appetite for that kind of collaboration. It seems like there is. Everyone before this bill was sort of on a different page, right? No one really knew how it was all gonna flesh out. So now that we know, there might be more to that, but And I was just. sure that
Is
was-
it- Some of these other districts, I mean, it's a little further on down the road, but they're projected, I mean, we're projected to have, lose about 8% of our budget capacity. Down in Middlebury and over in Virginia, they're talking 20% or something, huge.
They're definitely more significant. I would say. From what, it's hard to tell now, because there are so many iterations of various financial modeling, but what, at least the one that stuck in my head. We were the least impacted district in Addison County, and I would say Lincoln, Addison Northwest, and Addison Central were all. Considerably more impacted than we were.
So they might, like, as Aaron was saying, they might be motivated to start thinking not just about, next fiscal year, but what's gonna happen in a few years.
Yeah, there's,
One of the challenges, and I do think one thing that can help with the modeling is that the Pike Sonota report was based on 4,000 size districts. So that's a lot, but they are in like 200-300 elementary schools, and like it was just kind of split up in a way. But I think one thing that happened with the merger study committee was that I feel like a lot of districts were coming from a place where they had tried different things. While we've all had similar challenges, different approaches have been taken in other districts. And so I almost, and when people, we're talking, it sounded like there was a little, almost like, wow, we already did this really hard work here. You guys aren't considering it. We already did that, and so I almost feel that it would be beneficial to have if we considered maybe the first invitation was maybe a community engagement event of our boards, just our boards coming together and doing some kind of like exercise, like what have you done? What can we learn from that? How did that go with this choice that you made here now that it's been 5 years since you did that? What does it look like now? And there was a little bit of that with the merger study because they interviewed community members and got some feedback about how they felt about the changes since they had happened and what they were thinking. So just a little learning about where we're coming from, just as board members, mixing us up at different tables and talking about the experiences and changes that we've had and seen, and why did we do what we did when we made our unique decisions? Why are they doing what they did? And just kind of an exchange of ideas to kind of get to know each other more and understand that everybody has made effort. Like for Jen's, redid their building with a bond, but it took time to get to the point where it was understanding that we were investing the same amount in Mount 8, but we were doing it in a different way, right? So we were all investing in our buildings, but there was a perception that one was doing that less so than the other. So kind of getting to know what people are doing, I think could go a long way just to kind of be open to learning from each other in the beginning. Hearing what people's.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we need to keep in mind though is that it's a really tight timeline where this redistrict, the drawing of the maps is gonna happen in 1 month. And I think maybe if you're able to utilize your meeting next week to throw it out there and say, hey, this is what we discussed at our board meeting. Can we continue to, or can we engage with the rest of, your boards? Just to kind of get a feel for it, and if that's something that people are interested in discussing. That might be something to kind of push down the line a little bit, because I think you're looking at a very different situation right now where this is mandated versus something that, was something that districts tried totally on their own. And, I think utilizing some of that information that was gathered will be helpful, but I think based on the super tight timeline that we're looking at, I think there's a little bit more of a sense of urgency.
I feel as Chris was saying, to what you're saying, though, if we wanna have a meeting in July, it could be focused on this. And we could have, maybe those kinds of discussions, again, trying to reach a consensus, there are a lot of ways you can try to do that, and, so, I think one decision point is, do we want a meeting in July or try to, talk about this and early and some of the stuff.
Are you envisioning a joint meeting in July? Or are you talking about?
No, I was
MAUSD Board, or?
I was thinking, this board, we just started talking about, I mean, we've been talking about page 454. Quite a few months. We really haven't been faced with, okay, this is the law and what do we do about it, and we got an August time, so I was envisioning a meeting with the board. Out of order in July, we usually don't do something in July, but, just given the timing and urgency. Might be useful.
I don't see the urgency for August. I mean, you've got to, first of all, appoint these people, they've got to come together. It's gonna take them a while to settle. They're not gonna walk out of there after their first meeting and say, here's the district we've got. So I think we've got some more time than what we're willing to give ourselves. And I think there needs to be a thoughtful progression. And the fact that we've been doing this for a solid year or 2 or 3 or 9. Yeah, I think that we can certainly do it, and the Finance and Facilities Committee has already given some idea of where we want to go. I'm not worried about it having something to hit them with in August.
How are other people feeling?
I'm just, I hear you, I just conscious of the fact that, let's say we decide that we want to be a little proactive. As Patrick was saying, in the context of modeling and stuff, that's fine, if we think we should need to, then we have to reach out to, I'm sorry, still on control that. Then we have to reach out to the other 3 districts. So there's, and that's not gonna be easy, and that's gonna take some time. So I'm not saying, well, yeah, we need to hit them with our
Yeah,
proposal.
I'm not panicked enough.
Yeah, well,
Timing wise, December 1 is the date that task force is supposed to have their 3 recommendations ready to submit. So August to December is their window. When they get something done, actually, there is something in there about they need to have one option ready to go a little earlier so that the folks that are gonna start modeling finances around that can get started, but their report is December 1.
it is December,
Well, the other concern that several people tonight have raised is how do we as one board in one small rural school district, how do we influence what happens, meaningfully? And what we heard very clearly from the VSBA yesterday was that they need us and we need them in order to have an impact on how this law is implemented and ultimately sort of sanctioned by the legislature. So I think time is very much of the essence. I think we'd be missing an opportunity if we don't move quickly on this. And I would, my view is that I'll come another couple of days in July if I have to move this forward.
Can I just say a second, just because I got my head around kind of the envisioned sequence of events here. So if we met in July, our agenda would be to discuss what like the prospect of an Addison County district or the prospect of an Addison County supervisory union, like, and have a an MASD specific perspective on what we would like best. With then the idea of bringing that to other boards, like, and saying, we think it should be this. Cause I worry a little bit that if we come out front and say like, great, we sat down, we decided that supervisory union is the way to go for all of Madison County. And then we're gonna bring you in.
You don't have to say that,
But what
we put some things on the table.
But I guess I'm trying to understand, like, is then July to rule out possibilities and leave with a suite of options? Like, what's our goal there? And how does that fit into, say, something that Aaron's doing, which is obviously meeting with them next week, I'm wondering, is it like, do we start small and then bring the county in? Or do we bring the county in and collectively have that discussion. I don't know the best option. It's not a critique one way or the other. It's
No,
just
I-
trying to understand like,
I mean,
what do we think we're accomplishing or what's our goal in this overall sequence to make a recommendation that we think somebody might listen to? Both here in Addison County and beyond.
no, I definitely agree that we should not put ourselves into a position where we're seen as dictating to other districts and other supervisory unions what to do. But on the other hand, somebody has to take a leadership position.
Sure.
And kind of get the ball rolling, and I don't see why that shouldn't be us.
And I think we can present it in a way that isn't, well, we know it all kind of thing. You know, I think we can be flexible. But I think we can put out maybe some values and some key points, you know, to focus on. Different kinds of restructuring, you know, community connections, you know, how things will operate. Maybe just in general terms, but use those decisions to then meet with the other districts. So that's where, yeah, no,
No, it's helpful enough, because.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, Aaron, Patrick can help us out here. I'm not sure how to operationalize it, frankly. I mean, it seems to me that, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to set a July board meeting and just to restart this conversation. We wouldn't get anywhere. So I think we would have to figure out a way without violating, you know, open meeting laws to get some information out there for the board as a whole to be able to review and advance the discussion.
and maybe identify issues. You know, you can identify issues that would be the topic of discussion without, you know, obviously predetermining, you know, what the outcome is going to be. And there's gonna be, you know, just an app, of course, but then there's some administrative issues, you know, that you can talk about. Again, big picture, not nitty gritty, how do you actually operationalize the thing? But in terms of, you know, and you got, you know, a lot of towns have, a lot of districts have articles that say you gotta vote. You know, so what do you wanna do with that? That would be an issue, right? You know, and how do we wanna do that? And then we approach them and say, well, you know, how are you approaching? And can we reach consensus on it?
You can, you know, provide examples of what other units have done already. You know, specifically with respect to 454. Just to, you know, so what are other people doing, then we can decide on our own what we want to do.
And I guess for me, when I think about the next steps. And if I think about it from a backward design kind of standpoint. At some point. We need the school boards of Addison County. To either agree or not, where there's consensus. And obviously, the more countywide consensus there is, the more influence that will have on the process that's gonna be happening with the task force and then subsequently the legislature. And so the question then is, what do you as MAUSD board need to feel like you're ready to engage in that conversation around where we have consensus? And that's probably first, like, where do you have consensus as a board? And then you have a better position to know, like, this is where MAUSD is not individual board members' individual thoughts, but as a board, where are we? And how does that align or not align with where other boards might be? So I guess that's what I would envision the next meeting, whether that's July or later, for this board is. Where do we stand? And then I think to Brad's point, where do we stand on what? Because 454 is 155 pages of legislation, it's a lot of different things, so what are the points? That we really need to talk about and decide, yes, we as a board have consensus on this. Or no, we don't, point by point. And I think probably specifically, we're talking about redistricting. And so within that, it's SU or SD. 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, is it Addison County, is it inclusive of CTE? Because the Career Center is also a district in Addison County, the way it's structured. So there are probably some points within that umbrella of redistricting that could sort of organize a conversation around to see where there's consensus.
That's the way I'm looking at it too, you know, identify the issues, you're not, you know, you don't know the outcome of our discussion. But you identify the issues that we should be talking about. And, you know, Aaron, I think one of the things, I don't wanna try to ad hoc, you know, think of a list of issues, but you know, maybe we could forward them to you. You know, that these might be the topics that, some issues that we should be discussing to try to reach a consensus as a board, and then you get to make the decisions on it. You know, what sort of issues you can
Put on the agenda.
put on the agenda.
And possibly even, like, if, and so again, as I'm thinking about that end point where. All Addison County boards are weighing in on those, it'd have to be the same points in order to have that kind of. Deciding whether there's consensus or not, so even wonder about. Even if individual boards have meetings. But if there's a consistent series of, these are the points we need to identify individually and then see what do we have collectively. That kind of organization may be worthwhile.
Or maybe that's where Aaron's process with the other board chairs comes in. You know, if you have in your mind, you know, some issues that we've been thinking about, you can maybe talk to them and see, get some you know, see if they can get some commonality around the issues that then different boards can discuss among themselves and can maybe try to come together. Always optimistic.
Seems like a very nice process to me, frankly. But I think that we'd wanna have a list for Aaron before next week of. You know, these are the big umbrella of redistricting. I think that's a really nice way of framing it, Patrick. But within that, here are the things that we know can be sticky, right? The size, what's included, what isn't included. What we do about articles of agreement, and what do we do about, I don't know, contract, like, is there commonalities in negotiated contracts? Like, I think there's some similarities, I think, in a lot of ways between some of the negotiated agreements within Addison County. Even in terms of kind of basic rate, like, there might even be some ability to say, actually, we're kind of already operating schools in really similar ways. At least on these levels, that would make this kind of merger easier, that would make this really difficult. So we'd have some work in the next week to try to get through that. And then I presume you wanna ask, when you gave that to the other, you know, board members, like, are there issues that you see that we haven't? And that we would then be able to talk about at that next meeting, in July or otherwise. I love then the idea of sort of each board was sort of tasked with. Get some sense of where your part of this sits. Knowing we'll bring that together, and that feels like a pretty constructive process, and I guess that's what I was sort of unsure about. This feels very focused in terms of how we could then build to. This is each one of our parts, and here's really where we sit together and why we think that this is the recommendation we want to pass along to this committee.
When do you have time for you meeting with?
I'm just the board chair, so last week was every board chair.
I'm super disturbed.
Oh, could I have? Not to forget Hampton. Well, I mean, there are kids too, right? You got kids go to Hampton. So I wanna make sure not to neglect that as an issue. To talk about.
Kim was there. The
What's that?
board chair from Hannaford is also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. So if you all wanna send me thoughts about what we just talked about, and then I'll try to condense it, I'll do a share out when I have it sort of compiled. And then,
Do you want us to do a Google share this so we don't have to keep?
we can't all work on the same document, so you just send me what you have and I'll do that whole thing. Okay, and then I will share it out, like I said, and then when I meet with other people, I will ask if they all have the same thoughts, questions, concerns, and an appetite to do more together. And then iffy on whether or not we meet in July, you want me to sort of share out what my next meeting looks like with people, and if there is an appetite of working together, then we could think about setting a July meeting, or. Yeah, sort of wait and see what. Cause it might not make good sense to. It depends on what's going on, about what kind of meeting it might be.
Yeah, I can just say Hanford Career Center knows that most of the legislation for CPUs is on the to-do list for next fall. So they're waiting on that, like, so they,
Right, but how do you draw a boundary for the CTE district? And
well, if there's one option is creating the boundaries around the CPUs, their main thing is making sure they could get students from other places, right? Like, so that was included in what was passed this time, because I'm our rep on Hannaford, so.
Yeah.
We talk about it constantly and actually paid to have somebody follow the legislature and report.
I saw Nicole.
Yeah, yeah, and so we didn't just have, they weren't advocating, Nicole was advocating.
Yeah.
But we got 10 emails a week of what happened in every single type of committee that was even tangentially talking about this issue. So they are like. Super
They're
well
motivated.
informed,
They're
yeah,
very motivated.
yes, very motivated. And I'm not sure that they'd be ready to be where the school districts are, MAUSD, Regents, in Middlebury. I'm not sure that they're in the same place for this conversation, but it's always worth offering to Hanford. It's always worth offering to Lincoln, right?
But they're heavily reliant on us too,
Yeah,
right? Like it is. Whatever sort of filters out of what school districts are doing is gonna heavily impact them, so it might behoove them to still be part of that conversation. About what it might look like, or what a voice from us might look like, yeah, I think to your point,
Right,
even if they don't have the capacity to sort of choose for themselves right now about what's going on. And who knows if they're having an voice at all, really, frankly,
They could, all CPs could be one district,
could be.
they could be, but yeah, so there's so many things. It's the most stuff in there, I feel like it's super well enough in the cities.
Would these, the ones that we sort of throw out in the network, would that get to about the 4,000 student threshold? Or are we like artificially too small and would need to think bigger?
Addison County as a district, if we were to sort of conceptualize that, checks. At least most of the boxes in terms of the parameters that have been put around that, the one thing that I'm not really clear about, part of what the charge of the task force is to look at grand list value in districts and try to have that be somewhat comparable. So I have no idea really how Addison County District would stack up from a grand list perspective to any other district that might be conceptualized, so. That's one I don't know, but we would be about 4,000 students.
Geographic, there's a geographic factor, that certainly fits.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I just wanted to make sure like if it was gonna be 2,500 students and we did all this work to get everybody on the same page and then we came up with a proposal, like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a perfect marriage and we're half the size, which isn't the case, it sounds
We
like.
also need to think about, we've been sort of talking about it from the frame of Addison County, but it's only sort of Addison County. The districts that we just described are most of Addison County. But there are maybe 3 or 4 towns that are in districts outside of the ones we've been talking about. So I'm thinking about maybe Hancock and Granville, I think maybe are Addison County towns, but are in different districts. And then maybe Orwell, like there's something part of Rutland Northeast or part of Slate Valley that is technically in Addison County, but in a different district. So I just want to, make sure that that's understood. Yeah. It's only sort of Addison County.
Addison County Light.
And there was talk, I don't recall. Specific language in 454, but there was talk all along in the committees about. A desire to not necessarily break up current districts. That districts as they stand would join other districts to create these bigger districts.
So with that context, it feels like this is the right group of people in the moment.
As it stands.
As it stands, exactly. Not knowing how many of the subject, right? Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts we wanna share about that? Is this Lake Valley, board chair, do they attend the meetings together? No, not so far.
Okay.
It's just been.
White River Valley would be the other district that, so I think actually potentially Rutland Northeast, Slate Valley and White River Valley are the other three school districts that may have a town or two that are Addison County towns.
But certainly, if there appears to be an appetite for collaboration, that might be a good point, and then just say, how do we include all of Addison County in that thought process? I don't know what their goals look like. But I can dig into that if that comes. Okay. Are we feeling good about that topic? For now, I mean, feeling good is maybe too positive. Update from finance and facilities.
Yeah, sure. So you see the minutes, captures more or less that, but, the top line summary. We basically did two things. We did a little exercise, with Patrick and Floyd with some like really early modeling of FY 27. And some pretty significant constraints that we might have. To really highlight, I think, for ourselves and then allow us to sort of bring that up to the community. The challenge of the status quo, right? To try to maintain student programming, student opportunities, with the sort of same structures that we have right now. With impending financial constraints is gonna be really difficult. So there's a nice presentation there that Patrick and Floyd put together, and I encourage you to just quickly flip through that if you haven't. But it highlighted some of the sort of reoccurring sort of cost increments that we've seen over the last few years and some new ones. And some challenges therein. And then once we sort of maybe at least scared myself a little bit, maybe some others too, about the challenge that we have. Then we took to talking a little bit about, you know, what are some options that we might want to consider. That might be able to help maintain, you know, levels of service to students or ideally improve levels. While like sort of being amenable to the sort of financial constraints that we have. So we had a sort of ranging discussion there. And what that ultimately led to was some offline emails. Kind of driven through Patrick to come up with some ideas of some potential options to model for our August retreat. So some of these things are like grade banding within our district, right? So having all of the first and second graders in the same school, or third and fourth graders in the same school. This came largely out of the president of the superintendent's advisory committee. But other options could be, you know, reconfiguration of what grades are in which school, right, or which schools we're operating. So we have a list of 5 or 6, maybe 7 possible things that ideally will have some basic modeling. Is that
15?
Like 15.
okay? Well, I'm not sure how many Patrick's are ultimately gonna get to.
Yeah.
But I think the hope is that what that'll do is give us something a little bit more tangible. And even if a particular model doesn't actually get done, I think being able to look across the range of ones that will get done, you'll get a sense of like, what are the sort of implications of a change like this or a change like this? So that we might be able to apply some of those to the district when we think about FY 27, right? Try to meet that immediate challenge against the backdrop, obviously, of the broader conversation that we're having. So it's figuring out where we're at and then trying to brainstorm some ideas that we might collectively as a board look at in August. And then the usual Floyd updates on what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd like to say one, you know, Patrick noted while we were in that meeting, the seriousness of this, because last year we patted ourselves on the back that we started the budget process in September. This year we started in June.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So this is where, we had an email exchange of, you know, ideas that we'd like Patrick and Floyd to model. And I'd say most of them involved, you know, within the district. And as you can, you've heard that, sent something that talked about going beyond the district and seeing if, even if, you know, it's not full restructuring, but you know, maybe there's some things. I mean, I look back at the Levinson report, you know, there were some opportunities there that we identified with the chance, you know, I think Middlebury, obviously they got agreed, right? But that's where, you know, this issue around modeling, I think might dovetails into the other issue of, you know, what are we thinking about in terms of Addison County as a whole, in terms of our district? Not that you do it all at once. So I guess I'd ask Patrick whether you're comfortable, you know, at least exploring that sort of outside the district possibilities. Cause I know you were reluctant to do that without, you know, some confirmation.
Yeah, I'm still reluctant because I don't know, like, as I said in the meeting the other night, like annually. I'm in conversations, in particular with Addison Northwest, like, as there's an opening somewhere, like, is there any way we can partner in this and share this resource in this way? And sometimes we can and sometimes we can't, so outside of those opportunities that present to collaborate in that way, unless there's some, like, if you said we want to specifically look at what would it be if we merged with Addison Northwest. We can model that, but it's really hard to know, like, in a more piecemeal way, what could you do? Like, the reality is, there's very little we could do that would generate cost savings without some more of a significant structural aspect to what we're talking about. And until I have clarity on what structure are we talking about, the things I could model are endless and maybe worthless because we don't end up going in that direction. So that's why I think the conversation with whomever it ends up being interested in talking about ways we can partner more significantly has to happen first, and then that puts some guardrails around, well, in what way are we gonna partner and with whom are we gonna partner? And then we can have a direction to go and we can absolutely model that. But I think I don't know what I would do to model without that information.
But that's kind of chicken the egg sort of situation, isn't it? If you need to wait until the structuring. You know, what I'd love to see is if. Lenson, you know, he identified, you know, how could we reduce, you know, our need for a certain position, right? I mean, he identified it in his appendix. And I guess I'd be asking if you could just take a look at that appendix and see if there's some opportunities for cost savings. The dilemma I had with the list that we proposed, Mike, is that most of them involve closing an elementary school. And man, that gives me heartburn. And I don't. I'm willing to consider that, but not in isolation, you know? So that's my dilemma and my concern. Which is why I understand that, you know, it's not easy and it would be much less, I think, rigorous kind of financial analysis. But to me, I think we still be worth doing.
In fact, I did share this, I shared a similar concern, so I had seen something somewhat similar, maybe just from a different angle to Patrick saying, at least in the status quo model, right, where we keep things the same. I think it would be important to like point out like where the limited flexibility is to save money overall, like, so. In other words, we need to know. If we spend 85% of our budget on staff and facilities, so I think where we're at pretty much. Right, what are our options overall? I think it's kind of what you're also getting at, right? I wonder, again, trying to figure out if short of a full model, if there are ways that are in between. So for example, right, the supervisory union versus like full district, right? I imagine relatively quickly you have some thoughts as to differences in costs associated with those two models. Right, my rough sense is that in a supervisory union, you're gonna come and suggest that there's relatively limited opportunities for consolidation of central office, maybe some here or there. But because each district would be fulfilling those same roles anyways, you'd need to maintain a lot of those positions. As opposed to a merged district where all of a sudden it's one budget, right, it's one, and there's maybe more opportunity there. There you could probably get a pretty rough number overall on what would happen to a budget by saying, here's the merging of central office, right? Like, that's not a full model, but maybe that gets heard to what you're suggesting. The other thing that I'll point out, we should be able to pull these up is I think in particular in regards to the Levinson report, in the past budgetary cycle, Patrick and Floyd did provide, I think, point by point analyses of many of the suggestions of the Levinson report. So that's another place that I think we maybe already have. If barring any major change since then, which I don't think there are, where we might have information already at our disposal. To be able to say, wait, well, we think it's actually, essential that we pursue X, Y, or Z. Which might be again, a way that we can constrain some of those suggestions. Or if we had specific questions about how those particular suggestions would look in a supervisory union versus a district. Again, I think those might be ways that we could maybe in a more limited but still really productive fashion, be able to provide options apart from the ones that are being modeled now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really struck by the difficulties that are gonna be faced. And so I'm open to just about any option. To think about, which is why I'm suggesting, that even if it's a little more difficult, to put something like that on the table as an option for helping us now. And maybe the industry will say you can't do anything about it, but geez, before we consider some of those options, which got scary. I'd like to see what small alternatives.
Yeah, and I guess that's what so. If you recall, I was trying to get an actual motion from the Finance and Facilities Committee to direct me to model certain things so that I had very clear marching orders and I wasn't making stuff up on my own. We didn't quite achieve that.
Got close.
But we got a list, and I'm trying to do the entire list. Nowhere on that list is it, please model what a merger with Addison Northwest looks like. Please model what a merger with Addison Northwest and Addison Central looks like. Or with Lincoln or without Lincoln, or like, I need some clarity on like, what are you asking me to model? As opposed to, you model something that has some collaboration with somebody somewhere. I don't know what that is.
Could we do like a two things though, and could we do a breakdown of maybe, because Pike and does that. Right, Pike and shows what the cost is to have 4,000 person district, right, even just breaking down that report as an example of. What that could look like for that many students. So, like. Right, like some simplified bullets of. The understanding, and then in there is like, if you have a question about why, it's like, there's 10 pages explaining why for any one of the things. But, so that might be a way. Kind of get an idea of what that many students merged together could look like. And then adjustments, like if they were more or less of each type of skill. Could just be talked about, so that might be a way that's not specifically targeting, but then the other, the AOE on their YouTube page has Nate Levinson fleshing out those staffing precisely series.
Oh, good.
And so that is exactly fleshing out.
Yeah, he's working for the area.
Yeah, so he did these videos, they're like 30 minutes, and it's like, how do you share unified parts peoples? How do you share? I mean, it goes through all the categories, like literacy people, how do you share them across schools and utilize so that. You may not have all of the special educators you need, but here's how you can adjust how you use them to make it seem like you just doubled your staff. So that's exciting, right? And then, I know that it's not like, it's hard, I'm not gonna act like it's not hard, but. What have we already done, right? Because a lot of those things that I heard in there are things that I've also heard we're doing at our budget meetings. That we have already implemented, and so that could be really helpful, and what I suspect. Is that we'll have to do more than one of these things. Right, we have to do that no matter what happens, we have to utilize staffing to the greatest extent possible, in addition to other things.
I'm also hesitant to task the administration with that without having first asked any other district whether or not that's okay. To use them in that way, but two, it wasn't really a popular venture last time. And while I'd like to be proactive, I don't also want to take on the negativity of what that could mean. Just so we have all our options on the table, although I appreciate that perspective. So I think there's a lot of dueling things here, but I think it's the invitation to other boards to collaborate. If there's an appetite to just say, cool, could we look at what this might look like? Sort of quickly,
Yeah, so maybe it's a timing.
maybe it's
issue
timing,
thing.
yeah.
You know, I truly think that there are some opportunities for savings that we could do before big restructuring of some sort. But I think you're right, Aaron, that it might be diplomatic to approach it, you know. Not softly, but just in more congenial kind of collegial.
Yeah,
I'd love to suggest considering benchmarking something, right? You know, we can model and model and model, but if we're modeling something that at a very high level, without having to go too deep into the weeds, shows foundation formula plus 30%. That's what it's gonna cost our district based on just modeling that structure. Do we continue to spend time in that and drill down into the details when we already know foundation formula plus 30% probably isn't gonna float? Right? So what can we get on the table that is a realistic picture of what we can do going forward? I love the idea of what can we do to consolidate and bring things together, Herb, it's awesome. But I'll quote Mike Bash, if we eliminated our central office, we are nowhere near fixing our problem. So the question is, do we continue to figure out a way to just keep chipping away at the edges? Or do we take and make sure that we're looking at all of these options, but let's not spend an inordinate amount of time for something that just continues us in the same path. If we're doing it to buy time to get somewhere else, that's a completely different discussion. But if we think that we're gonna solve our problem going forward by nibbling around the edges, that is an awful lot of work to get that level of accuracy to, at the end of the day, say, it doesn't help our kids. Right? And it doesn't matter if it's my town, your town, their town, we as a group have to do what's best for the whole towns. What's best for Mount A, not what's best, I'm gonna point at you, Herb, not what's best for Starksboro. What's best for the Mount A district? And if keeping Starksboro's open is what's best, then that should be considered. If closing Bristol and moving those kids out to the small towns, if that's what's best, then let's chase that. But I think to spend an inordinate amount of time to get to the point where we look at foundation formula plus, and you fill in whatever number you want. For me, we'll work through the numbers. But if it's foundation formula plus 30% is the cutoff, we're not gonna spend any time on something that only nibbles that much off our edge and doesn't get us to a point where we're doing the best work we can for our kids, not what's best for any one individual town.
Yeah, so, please, I think you must have understood what I'm saying. I feel very strongly about this district, Lloyd. And I think every board member around here wants to do the best for kids.
I don't disagree.
Well, I don't know what you were saying then. I'm willing, I think it's a matter of time.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly okay. I think you made some sense about, let's have some other discussions with the other chairs before we do that. And that might help to focus. They might have some ideas and that might help to focus the thing, or they might say, forget about it, in which case, Floyd, you're right, why waste time? So I'm willing to, timing wise, but
I'll model anything, I'll model
I-
anything as a group, I just don't, I look at it and I think it's, as a group, we should be wise enough to be able to say. Foundation formula plus X is a non-starter for us for what's best for our kids. If we have to cut that much, 43 positions. To make a number work. That would be untenable for our district.
But I'll just add that. I'm an advocate of collaboration with other districts, I've been talking about that for all 9 years that I've been doing this job, that I think that makes a lot of sense. So it's not, none of my hesitation comes from thinking it's a bad idea or a lack of willingness to do that. Hopefully I've demonstrated that over time. It's really just a matter of understanding the sensitivity around this, the politics around it, and wanting to get to a point where we're in productive collaborative conversations and not getting off on the wrong foot, and our relationship is then gonna get in the way of where we ultimately are trying to get.
Okay, so I'm gonna put a tack in that, okay,
So
and
that is the committee.
so that was the committee meeting.
Absolutely.
We kind of did that.
Well, no, because Melissa's gone
Oh,
out,
that's right.
so.
So policy and governance, I'm gonna move down to that update. We just continue to chip away at the VSBA website model policies. Thing is still being fishy. We can't access all of the model policies, so that's been weird to try to update our policies. It's not really working, right? So we spent a good amount of time talking about the sort of draft model for the HHB investigative changes. And what kind of administrative procedures might change in response to that. We also talked about the articles of agreement, and this sort of goes along with this whole, what we've been talking about right now. What's closure, what's best for the districts, so on and so forth. And so at some point, not right here, right now, we need to really think about the definition of closure, really think about our line as a board. Really, we come to a consensus about what we mean when we're saying closure, what we mean when we're looking at our options, what that means for us. And we sort of thought that we could wait until after the retreat and see what ideas are fizzling out of there to open that conversation. And that was sort of the whole meeting was those two things, so. Continue to bring you changes as in the policies as they come up. Community engagement, I know Meredith isn't here, so I don't know. There's a brief update from somebody.
You want me to do it? Okay, so we talked about our event that we had on May 28th. The attendance was unfortunately rather low. It was also the first time that we actually had a really beautiful day. For what felt like weeks, there were also all kinds of sport ball events happening, so we talked about sort of changing the timing on the next event that we do. And to take advantage of when there are, open houses and take advantage of those events that are happening at the schools to draw people in, to get it on people's calendars a little bit more in advance. And still utilizing, the upper learning, we spitballed some other ideas. Food, potential childcare, just kind of keeping the conversation going, to keep these kinds of events going. And then what else did we talk about? Oh, and then we worked on the charge. Draft is in the minutes. I don't know if anybody have any questions on? Maybe put out there.
We can add that to the agenda for August and we'll.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, but it was great. We started off with the tour of Beaman. I had not been there before, and it was a really, really good experience. Yeah.
It's nice to.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how the college students, in weather like this, but
Yeah. Did I miss anything? Cool. Barb, any other thoughts? Beth, any other thoughts?
No, I enjoyed the tour, and as mentioned, the draft is in progress, so any feedback would be welcome. Thank you.
Our tour guides at Beaman were 2 6th graders.
Oh,
They did a marvelous job. The details and their own reflections and Really needed for them to.
Okay. We're down to public comment section. You've been here an awful long time. How? Feel. You're from appeal.
Yeah,
I don't recall getting a communication from you requesting that appeal for tonight.
you sent it to me and gave me the date and said it's at 6 o'clock in the library.
Okay.
Natea O'Brien.
Right.
I
I-
probably have a copy of your email.
Okay.
So
I've been here a long time.
you have been here a long time. I
And
didn't
this is-
see you on the agenda, so
And then when the first public comment didn't bring anything about, thought maybe the second comment, but really not. Okay.
So. I guess, can we? Add an executive session?
Yeah, that's what it said it would be, actually.
Yeah.
Executive session, don't we usually?
We typically do, as there isn't one on here, but we could amend the agenda.
Yeah, but there are other components that we need to be prepared for.
She's been here this whole time, so. It's.
And I'm ready to be done with this, quite honestly.
Sure.
This has been dragged out a long time.
Is this from the high school?
Yeah,
Please so, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a high school representative here, so. No matter what, there's gonna have to be another meeting. You
And
can have an executive session.
my frustration, I have an email from you. Everything about this whole procedure has been not done right. You have not followed the procedure at all. According to your policies, starting from when I was supposed to get a letter so many days after,
Can we?
I didn't get the letter.
This would be like executive session type, right? Like, cause this is still like the public podium.
Yeah, do we
But-
wanna, let's hear, yeah,
We should have
Let's-
opportunity to talk.
I agree, so why don't we add an executive? Let me find what article that's gonna be under. Would it be this one? Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll add an executive session. Under T1 BSA 5313 A7, which will be academic records. And
Sorry, Brian, can you just repeat?
yes,
Repeat the title.
Yep. T1 BSA 5313 A7. Yep, and we will make a motion to enter. And we'll invite in Patrick. Do we want to introduce?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll invite in Patrick in to train that, so if someone could make that motion, please. So Melissa first.
That's second.
Kristen second, all those in favor of entering executive session under T1 BSA 5313 A7 academic records at 8:11, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You wanna close the public comment first, so that.
We'll come out and we'll do that. There,
Yeah. Get that motion down.
Melissa, Kristen Boyd.
So we stop recording.
Yeah, we'll stop it and then we'll let Vicky and Floyd go.
Yeah, and then Beth, you're free to jump off as well, then we can just keep using the same link. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
So we exited executive session. At 8:46. Okay, we had an August meeting, we have prep in here, but I wanna back up a little bit, just, there's no other public comment. No, public. But, that was just a review of the work plan. In August, we just have the annual meeting, which we will send out the agenda, which is pretty much complete. And then just our business meeting as usual. If you want to, you can table your meetings in August. You can hold them, maybe 3 meetings in your life. You choose and just let us know.
I mean, it's always, we're not.
I
Not
agree.
for because I.
Yeah, okay. So I have the meeting eval open, level of engagement, high or low. Agenda followed. I'm gonna put a caveat in.
With amendment.
Does the chair effectively establish agenda and materials for distribution to the board? Effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation for participation of all members. Yep. Any comments? Other feedback for chair? What went well?
First discussion.
Planning for the budget on it. So it's pretty wild.
Any other suggestions for future movements? Okay. Can I get a motion?
Move to adjourn.
There you go.
My second.
8:48. All those in favor of adjourning at 8:48, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?